So I'll begin now with some general introductory observations on Greek thought, and more particularly this thing we call the Troy tale. The Troy tale. I'll begin today and finish tomorrow with this presentation. My ambition is to introduce to you Greco-Roman thought and the three major epics of that Greek and Roman thought: the Iliad, the Odyssey, both attributed to a guy named Homer, although we don't know much about this Homer cat, and then finally Virgil's Aeneid. So another way to say this is, I'm going to look at Edith Hamilton's classic text, Mythology. I'm going to assume a reading of part 1, part 2, and part 4. But I'm going to spend the majority of my comment time here on part 4, okay? And I'm going to outline for you the major events from those stories. This will allow you then in your reading and in your study of the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid to at least have a frame of reference, all right? Let's first of all, though, answer a quick question. What is an epic and why should I care? And to answer that, we have to understand what we will call the role of the poet in relation to epistemology. Epistemology. Epistis, the Greek, of or relating to knowledge. Now, the Greeks had an interesting view of the world. I'm working on the whiteboard now. The Greeks had an interesting view of the world. First, they had their gods. Then they had humans. What made these gods different from these humans? Two things. One, the gods immortal, humans mortal. Right? In other words, the gods don't live and die. Humans live, but not for very long. The second thing, the gods not only are immortal, but they have knowledge. They can see both the past, the present, and the future. Now, there's always debate when reading Homer, and to some degree Virgil, about really how much knowledge the gods have of the future. That sometimes becomes problematic. One picture is, for the Greeks, the gods sit up on Mount Olympus, this wonderful little mountain north of Athens. If you wish, you can go visit. And this mountain has almost year-round a ring of clouds on its summit. And the Greeks imagined that the gods kind of sit up there, and it's kind of like they watch big screen TVs of, you know, that wretched shows that you see where people put cameras in a house and then everyone videotapes that violence, right? And they call that an entertainment or whatever. Similar kind of thing. The gods can kind of watch what's going on, and then every once in a while they can inject themselves into human affairs. Okay, but the gods know things. Humans, on the other hand, know only a little of the past and virtually, you know, a little bit of the present. They know nothing of the future. Only hypothesize is best, right? They can't know the future. And this is kind of what differentiates humans from gods. Now, these gods are understood in anthropomorphic ways. What does that mean? Anthropomorphic. They see their gods in the form of humans. Anthro, right? If you study in university anthropology, you're studying human culture. So anthropomorphic, they picture their gods as humans, all right? They kind of think of them in that way. And these gods are all of them like stunningly Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, stunningly beautiful. What is the one exception? Yeah, Hephaestus, right. Once the Latinate is, of course, Vulcan, for you Star Trek fans in the house, right? And Hephaestus is not, he's not physically beautiful. In fact, he's even what? He's not only physically unattractive, but what else? Does anyone remember from the reading? He's lame. Yes, he's physically got an abnormality, which for the Greeks means he can't reach perfection. What's ironic though about that fact? He's hooked up with who in the pantheon of gods and goddesses? Right, the ugliest god gets the most beautiful goddess. Go figure. Guys, of course, always say this, that they never get the most beautiful women. Always hang out with the ugly, blah blah blah. In between the gods and the humans now sit the poets. This is sometimes hard to translate out of the Greek. The poets, we would translate today, the term is artists. Artists. Okay? And the way this works is, see, for the Greeks, these people are very special people. Why are they special? Because these poets are inspired. They invent this word, by the way. Inspiration, over relating to pneuma, spirit. In other words, the idea is, quite literally, and the Greeks really believe this, that these poets are really special people that the gods will give special knowledge to above everybody else. So in the Greek culture, the artist is given the predominant status symbol because these poets, artists, are given the special information that on their own they would not possess. When the poet then gets ready to make an observation, the poet will invoke the muse. To invoke means to ask or to request help from. The muse, the goddess, who will help to tell the story, provide the information. So for example, when we pick up right away the Iliad or the Odyssey, sing, O goddess, of the rage of Achilles, one translation of the Iliad. The invocation of the muse will be the hope that the gods are in fact helping tell the story. Let's point out then that we are not talking about modern day artists who kind of invent their own persona and then they come up with whatever it is they want to say from their own. No, this is not the way the Greeks think of art. The way the Greeks think of art is, it is a gift from the gods vis-a-vis the artist or the poet. So the poet is special, not because of who he or sometimes she is, but rather because what the gods have given to this person. Then the poet will give to humans, right, some kind of artistic construction. Most of the time, it's going to be a story. Remember, the early stories of the Greeks are predominantly oral in nature, right? So you have these long poems that are going to be orally kind of handed down over time, all right? Now, these stories, and this is huge that you understand, Nietzsche, the great 19th century philosopher, made a lot about this, and he differentiated between pre-modern and modern cultures. He said the pre-modern cultures, they kind of understood this a lot better than modern cultures. These stories from these poets, these stories are not for entertainment, although they will entertain. Rather, these stories are to explain the unexplainable. Now, along with Hamilton today, we call these stories myths, but we have to be really careful with the use of that language. We are not calling these myths as in untrue stories. Later, for example, if in one of my lectures I'm talking about the myths of the Greeks, or the myths of any number of myths. For example, I could talk about the myth of Genesis 3 from the 1611 King James Version of the Bible. We're not talking about an untrue story. Their veracity or non-veracity doesn't even get considered. When we use the term myth, we mean a story to explain the unexplainable. In other words, it's early science, if you will, right? So, for example, the Greeks identify that every morning when they get up, there's the sun in the east, and in the evening it goes to the west. The obvious question is, why does the sun move? This, remember, we're in early pre-science, right? Why does the sun move? So they will invent a story to explain the unexplainable. Apollo comes out, he has that huge ball of fire, he has those big old ponies, he wraps, ponies of course get tired, they need to rest, etc., right? Why is it that, for example, the seasons happen as they happen? We have the famous story, of course, of Demeter's daughter, Persephone. Good. Persephone taken down into the underworld. She would have been fine if she hadn't in the underworld done what one thing? She eats, of course. A pomegranate is what she eats, yes. And that, then, there has to be a negotiation, which is going to explain why when Demeter, the goddess of harvest in the seasons, right? When Demeter is happy, everything's growing beautifully. When Persephone has to, however, start to get ready to make her descent into Hades for her prescribed period of time, we're about to reach that, aren't we? Here coming quickly in the fall. Demeter gets sad, everything stops growing. Well, we, of course, will see this today as kind of silly and childish and that kind of thing. But, again, the poets are the ones that kind of give information. Like, for example, here I am, lecturing away. All of a sudden, I keel over and croak. Yes, no more annotations for the rest of the semester. But the obvious question beyond that is, not do I have to get my annotations still in, but, what happened to old man McGee, and where does he go? One minute he's here, the next minute he's not here. This is a really intriguing question. Again, we don't really know for sure until the poets tell us, and the poets tell us, it's not over when you go. No, there's a whole nother existence. It's an existence beyond this existence. It's called the afterlife. Well, really, what's the afterlife like? Well, you can pick up any number of texts and you can find out, most notably, of course, Homer's Odyssey, which will tell you that in the underworld all kinds of things happen just like Disney's Hercules explains it, kind of. So that's what the poets, well, you came in whistling Disney, so I thought I would just extend it.
Love that.
Okay. The Greeks used their stories as a way to kind of give us our first science, an explanation of the world and the phenomena of the world explained through these epics. Number two, these epics become national songs. What do I mean by that? Well, kind of like our Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem, the Greeks also have their anthem. Their anthems, these national songs, all cultures have at least one great story or song or poem. Most of these begin in early dark antiquity as stories, songs, poems that are oral, that later get written down. We think of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey this way. Long before they're recorded in writing, they have been told around campfires and the like. There are exceptions. Some are written down from the get-go. Virgil will sit down and write the Aeneid, right from the start. No oral tradition there, but he is building on an earlier tradition of Homeric epics. Dante will just sit down and write the Divine Comedy, of which the first part is, as we know, the Inferno. Milton will sit down and will kind of sit down and write. By this point he's blind, and so he just recites it, and his daughters write it down. Paradise Lost. Every culture will have its great song. In Spain it's El Cid. In France it's the Song of Roland. And we could go on and on. Of course, as we say this out loud, some of you will say, well, then what is the great American epic? If the Greeks had their Iliad and the Odyssey, and the Romans had their Aeneid, if the Italians have the Divine Comedy of Dante, and the English have Paradise Lost, what is the epic of America? This, of course, was on Whitman's mind when he would write Leaves of Grass. Of course, today we will qualify often Leaves of Grass as the closest thing America has to an epic tradition. But for those of us who have read Paradise Lost or Dante or Homer, we recognize it's not the same thing at all. It's not even kind of close. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit different, right? The national song, let's come back to it, by the way. What do we mean when we use this phrase? Well, if you want to know what matters to a culture, you look at its great epic poem or poems, and it will tell you. It will tell you what matters to the people of that time. Okay? So as we go through an adumbration or an outlining of these stories, we will ask ourselves, this culture, what does it care about? later when we, for example, look at the Anglo-Saxon epic Beowulf. We'll ask, that culture, very early English culture, Anglo-Saxon, what did they care about? What mattered to them? Another way to say it maybe is, were they willing to die for? What were they willing to give their life for? What mattered to them? Okay, so we kind of study these poems as a way to, in some ways, kind of recover history. It tells us a lot about the Greek culture. You can inverse this observation, though, and ask it this way. If the Homeric story we collectively, following Hamilton, will call the Troy tale, were to be taken as the earliest example of a story in the Western tradition, and we kind of say that, then we might ask this really intriguing question. If you were to build a culture off of this story, what would that culture look like? What would it prize as being most important? Well, some of us will say right away, if you've read part 4 of Edith Hamilton's Mythology, there's a whole lot of violence in that. People are always getting jacked. There's a whole lot of sex. Freud made a lot of this, didn't he? And you'd be absolutely right about that. And guess what? Those two seem to come together a lot. You're right about that. Would you say, right? You got to have lots of fighting. And of course, these are songs predominantly written by a man, for men. We're going to ask this question over and over again. Where are the women? And right away, we're going to notice a strange duplicity. So, for example, we will say, this culture seems to kind of think that women are about objects. Usually sexual, but not always sexual. They're like possessions. They're told what to do, and if they don't do it, they usually get jacked. It's that simple. Well, that sounds like a patriarchy, we will call it, of course, where men run the world and women get to say, thank you for running the world for us. But the problem will be immediately met when we look, for example, at the way the Greeks construct their pantheon of gods and goddesses. Because, hello, if you pick up the Odyssey and start reading it, the most important personage is not Odysseus at all. In fact, we won't see Odysseus until roughly book 5, where he's sitting out on a rock, the great warrior Odysseus, whining and crying about how terrible his life is. The one who predominates the Odyssey is the goddess Athena, which is going to be very intriguing. The Greeks have this kind of balancing act between, on the one hand, seeing the world as a man's world, but on the other hand, recognizing the world is Athena's world and the like. Aphrodite will factor heavily as well in our stories of Troy tale, as we tell. So we'll kind of recognize that there's all kinds of interesting questions of life. Dare we say it? Philosophies. So we'll kind of use that as a catch-all phrase. We come to these epics to find out, what are the philosophic views of the world that these people inhabit? How do they think about life and death and values and love and hate and all that kind of stuff as well? We could keep going. Early psychology, we're going to find a lot about men and women as we understand psyches in this. Sociology, when you put a bunch of people together, how does it seem to work out? We have argued before, and you'll have to decide for yourself in this spring when we get there. You really can't appreciate the underlying conflicts of the famous novel Lord of the Flies, Golding's classic little ditty, unless you understand what the Greeks postulated about sociology and when you put a bunch of people together in a group. We'll see it right away at the beginning of the Iliad. Okay? With that in mind, enough of an introduction. Let's now go to the texts themselves. And again, we're working with general outlines here, all right? General outlines. Mr. Schreiber, if you're capable of it, will you kind of let me know when I have 5 minutes left in the hour? Okay? Just kind of do one of these to let me know, and then I'll start winding this up. Edith Hamilton, in part 4 of her classic text, Mythology, will collectively call this the Troy tale. We'll continue. By the way, this is T-A-L-E, right? Not T-A-I-L. The Troy tale will divide into 3 parts. What we will often refer to as the Pre-Iliadic, that is to say pre-Iliad, the stories of the Iliad, and then what we will call post-Iliadic, that is to say stories that will follow the Iliad. You can see then the preeminence that the Iliad is given in the construction of this Troy tale. And it is true. The Iliad will sit as the central, most important text of all texts. If you have to answer the question ever, what's the single most important text in Western canon? It's the Iliad, because it serves as the central figure point of all the texts to come. Okay? Now, what I just said can easily be debated, and I hope that we will debate it. Here's the problem, though. If you pick up the Iliad and you start reading it, you're going to jump right into a war that's being fought at the walls of Troy. Well, why are they there and why are they fighting? Well, we've got to have some stories that precede, that, are you ready for this? Often aren't even referenced in the Iliad. In other words, the assumption is that when you're hearing the story told aloud first and then you read it, you kind of already understand why they're at the walls of Troy. No big shock here. It's going to have to do with guys and girls, right? Okay, that will not shock us. So these pre-Iliadic stories we will start with, that will lead us up to the stories of the Iliad, and then of course with the fall of Troy, which by the way does not happen in the Iliad, right? The fall of Troy, then of course there are some stories that follow that. Taken in collection together, we'll call them the Troy tale. Let's now begin with pre-Iliadic stories. These are the stories that will come before the telling of the events of the Iliad. And everything begins for us with a party. No big shock here, the Greeks love their parties. We think we invented spring break. All we ever do in spring break on MTV is pay tribute to what the Greeks understood as their Dionysian festival of the spring. Well, the gods party too. And there's this huge party on Mount Olympus and everybody gets invited except for one goddess. She's the goddess, she shows up at the party and people, she showed up. It's not going to be long before, we used to have girls like this at Royal High School, not anymore. The ones that seem to like to create drama, these kinds of girls. Not anymore. We don't have those kinds of people at Royal High anymore. But, that loves to, that is Iris, the goddess of discord, disharmony, right? And so she's not invited to the prom. She gets really mad about this. And so what she does is she sneaks up to where the party is. She creates a golden apple. Around the outside of the apple, she writes to the best looking. It's translated to the fairest, to the most beautiful. And she throws it into the middle of the room, and they all think it's a bomb. And run away. No, remember, they're immortal, they can't die. They pick up the apple, they see that there's this, to the most beautiful, and immediately 3 goddesses demand that the apple belong to them. Because back in Greek times, women wanted to be thought of as beautiful, and girls would fight against each other, jealousies, because of all things, physical attraction. Can you believe that? Yeah, it's insane, I know. Back in the day, right? Back in the day. So the 3 goddesses jump up. Those 3 goddesses, you should have them, of course, in your notes already. Those 3 goddesses in order: Hera, Athena, and of course the lovely Aphrodite. Hera jumps up and she says, the apple belongs to me and I have every right to it, and here's why. My husband just happens to rule the cosmos. You've heard of him? Zeus is his name, and he's the one who's always out trying to hanky-panky, and of course Hera's always trying to catch him, and she usually catches him just at the end, and she yells at him really good and that kind of thing. And she says, I deserve the apple, and Zeus is kind of like, because next steps up Athena. Athena is the goddess of love and or goddess of wisdom, but she's also, well, she was, guys, you remember these girls in 3rd grade on the playground when she walked up to you and said, this swing is mine, and all the guys in the class went, cool. Because that's like, yeah, you do not mess with Athena. Athena would jack you up as look at you. And so Athena steps up and says, I can kick the ever-living snot out of every girl in the room. I get the apple. And Zeus is like, Aphrodite steps up and she says, hello, are you people all insane? I am the goddess of love and beauty, clearly the most beautiful. They'll even make a reality show about me someday and call it, that Kardashian wretchedness. I deserve to have the apple. Give me the apple. Zeus is typical male. Ladies, does this sound like a guy or what? He doesn't want to make up his mind. So he goes, well, all 3 of you are really hot, that's true, but I don't want to make a decision. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you down to the world, and you're going to go find a guy named Paris. He knows beautiful women. He'll tell you which one of you is the most beautiful. And the 3 goddesses are like, Oh, okay, so you're not going to... No, I could, but, you know, much better. Paris knows this much. We'll let Paris. Now, we got to talk about this Paris guy, because he's an interesting guy. When we see Paris for the first time, he's sitting under a tree strumming a guitar. Oh, my life stinks. Oh, if only I didn't live in a town with 3 stoplights. I know I could be somebody. Oh, my life stinks. Who is this guy? Well, we know what he doesn't know. There's a whole lot about himself he does not know. What he doesn't know is that on the night he was born, he was actually born in the greatest city in the world. He was born in the first New York. He was born in the first London. He was born in the first Tokyo. The greatest city of the world, of course, was Troy. What made Troy such a great city was not only its great government and its king, King Priam, and his beautiful wife Hecuba. What made Troy a great city was its building, its structure. The walls ran, estimates are, up to 40 and 50 feet into the air. Solid stone as thick as this room is wide. Chariots could ride abreast at the top of this great and magnificent city. King Priam goes to attend his wife Hecuba on the night of Paris' birth, and is told by a blind prophet, often attributed to Tiresias, the prophet bard who can see both the past, the present, and the future. Tiresias has lived both lives as a man and as a woman. Of course, the Greeks believe in reincarnation, remember? So you come back over and over again. The only difference for Tiresias is that he can remember the life of both a man and a woman. And to that degree, Tiresias knows what humans just can't know. Guys will never understand girls. And girls... can girls understand guys? Yeah, maybe. Tiresias walks in and he says, uh-oh, problems. Problems, what do you mean problems? My son is just born. Beautiful Paris. What do you mean problems? No, Tiresias says, here's the deal. You got to kill that kid. Why do you got to kill the kid? Infanticide is often happening in these myths, where a child must be sacrificed or killed for the betterment or the safety of the group, and it always constructs a problem. We think, of course, of Oedipus in the story there as well. You got to take this kid out, you got to kill him. Well, Priam says, dude, I'm not going to kill my own kid, but this is what I'll do. I'll second best it, and I'll try and defeat the will of the gods. I'm going to take my kid outside the walls of Troy, I'm going to give him to the shepherd guy, and this shepherd guy is going to raise my son, and that will allow me to come and visit and look in on my boy and kind of watch him grow up. But here's the thing. In Greek mythology, when you're born the son of a king, you grow up to look big and strong and Brad Pitt handsome, and he does. Let's just say it in our PG-13 rating, Paris knows women. No, I'm just going to say that. Paris grows up and he knows girls, okay? He has seen girls once or twice, okay? You know what I'm saying? And so there he is sitting under his tree strumming away. Oh, if only I could. Oh, I'm so sad. When these 3 gorgeous goddesses come up. Ladies, what can I do for you? Hera, we got this problem. See, here's this thing. There's this golden apple, and we need to know which one of us is the best looking, and we want you to tell us. And the one that tells us gets the apple. And Paris is like, whoa, yes! Today is my day! He's a typical guy. Ladies, does this sound like a guy or what?
Yeah.
He says, okay, here's the deal. You want me to choose which one of the 3 of you are best looking. What do I get out of it? Typical guy. What do I get out of it? Hera's like, you're absolutely right. I'm so glad you asked that. So here's the deal. Each one of us will offer you something. And again, Paris goes, yes, this is my perfect thing. Each one of us is going to offer you something, and then you get to decide which one of us is the best looking. And Hera says, and I go first. And Athena and Aphrodite, you can see them crossing their arms like, why does she always get to go first? Hera steps up and says, this is what I'm ready to offer you. If you choose me as the most beautiful, I'll offer you the world. Because ask the other 2, and they both begrudgingly nod, yes, it's true. I am Queen Goddess. I can give you pretty much the world. I'll give you everything. Okay, you have all the money you want. I give you everything. Give me the apple. He almost does it. He almost gives it to her. And then he's like, wait a minute, who's like the next one? She's pretty hot. Athena shoves Hera out of the way. I am so glad you asked me that. Because here's the deal. I'm Athena. I will give you military might. Because here's the thing. Hera can give you the world, but you got no military power. You can't hold on to it for very long. Am I right or am I right? Hera's like, ugh. I hate it that she always pulls that card out. Athena says, we'll be able to completely kill all those wretched Greeks that you hate so much. Remember, Paris is from Troy and therefore a Trojan, right? We'll kill those wretched Greeks, we'll ruin all those Greeks, and you'll have all of the things you want in the whole wide world and the power to hold on to it. Give me the apple. He almost gives her the apple, but then he sees the third goddess. And she's kind of standing there, she's kind of looking away, waiting for him. And he's like, well, what's the third one going to offer me? And she goes, oh, me? What? Oh, me? I'm Aphrodite, I got nothing to offer you. Except. Paris is like, yes, yes, go on. Well, here's the deal, she says. Oh, man, are you ready for this? On the one hand, you can offer a guy all of the money and power. On the other hand, she goes, all I can give to you is one night with the most beautiful woman in the world. Well, I don't know. He doesn't even think about it. Bam, immediately gives her the apple, gives Athena or Aphrodite the apple. Immediately. Athena and Hera are like, are you kidding me? Dude, I just told you I was going to give you everything in military power. You could have gotten any girl you wanted. Yeah, but Aphrodite can make her fall in love with me. It's a whole different ball game. I want. Very important moment in our story. By the way, this is often translated as the judgment of Paris, the decision of Paris. And by that we mean the moment that Paris decides to give the apple to Aphrodite and favor her and her blessing. But the subsidiary side effect is huge, prodigious. Hera and Athena are torqued off. And guys, I'm just going to make this quick observation about women and their capacity to remember things. Someday, Mr. Schreiber, if you are married someday and your girl comes to you and she says, honey, am I getting a little bit kind of fat? Hey guys, there ain't but one right answer to that question, and it better come fast. Because I mean, if you go, well, I'm really glad you brought that up. I've been needing to talk to you about that. Oh. Let me just say it out loud, guys. They never, ever, ever forget. All right, that's just not gonna happen. They just don't forget. All right, they ain't but one right answer to that question. And Aphrodite is going to give the apple, but Hera and Athena. Oh. From that moment, Hera and Athena decide the city of Troy's going to have to buy the farm. Paris is Trojan. All of the Trojans are going to pay for this affront to their honor. And they leave. Of course, Paris, he doesn't care. He's got the beautiful Aphrodite standing there next to him. So, who is she? And Aphrodite says, well, everybody knows who the best looking girl in the world is. We all know that. It's Helen. Paris, oh, I've seen her calendar. Yeah. No, I'm kidding. It's a different time. Helen, he says, I've heard of Helen. She's like stunning. Most beautiful woman in the world, Aphrodite says. And then Paris goes, yeah, but like, isn't she like married to like Menelaus, the king of Sparta? And for those of you who've seen the film 300, you kind of know all about guys in Sparta and the way they think about their women, okay? Yeah, and she goes, don't worry about it, I'll take care of everything. This is all I want you to do. Get in your little boat, sail over to Sparta, I'll take care of everything else. Paris is like, okay. So he gets in his boat, he sails into the harbor of Sparta. Now they have this rule in ancient Greece, where the king comes down to visit and meet with visitors. And so the king of Sparta, Menelaus, comes down to the harbor to meet this beautiful young man who shows up in this boat. And he asks him who he is. Paris says, oh, me, I'm nobody. I'm just kind of knocking around the Mediterranean. Where am I? Menelaus, you don't know where you are. You are in Sparta, the greatest kingdom in the world. Oh, congratulations. So, like, you know, who runs this show? I run this show. I'm Menelaus, the greatest king in the world. Oh, congratulations for you. Well, you what, live here alone? You haven't heard about my wife? My wife, Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world. Oh, congratulations. Well, I got to be going. I'll get on my boat. Menelaus, no, no, no. I want you to stay. You stay this evening. I'll feed you. And if you're lucky, I'll even let you get a glimpse of my wife. Oh, okay. I guess I can make time in my busy schedule to meet you and your... What was her name again? Helen. Oh, yeah, I'd love to meet Helen. They're eating. Paris asks a couple times, like, dude, when is she? I thought you sang her name. Don't worry, she'll come down the stairs later. Now here's the deal. The Greeks had a problem they didn't understand. They knew it existed. They didn't